It's a big world, a troubled world. Yet on every continent and under every flag, man wants to get closer to his fellow man. He would replace famine with plenty. He hopes for peace in the midst of war. He asks the all-important question, can the world be united or not? This is John McVane speaking from Flushing Meadow, New York. I said the question was important because it's the unspoken thought behind a good deal of the business here at the United Nations, the meetings, debates, and negotiations. People of different countries, backgrounds, and beliefs find that on fundamental things they are united. I don't think many people here ever get really hopeless about the idea of a united world. It's an idea that grows slowly, but at any rate, at the UN, it does grow. Around this table sit correspondents from different countries, from Asia, from America, and from Africa. Each week, they meet some international figure here. They ask completely unrehearsed, frank questions and expect frank answers. From the exchange, they hope somehow to get some new light on matters that will make news tomorrow or next month. And they hope also to get a little more understanding of the forces that pull us apart and those that bring us together. Our guest tonight is Professor Ahmed S. Bokhari, Minister and Permanent Representative of Pakistan to the United Nations. I always feel that Professor Bokhari is a broadcaster who made good. He's one of the profession. He was Director General of the All India Radio during the war years of 1939 to 1945. When India and Pakistan became independent, he became an advisor on the Pakistan radio. I know that if there are any slip-ups, I can always signal him and he can take over the microphone. Mr. Bokhari also has a few other professions. He is a college president. He's principal of Lahore College, and the government college in Lahore, which is one of the oldest and one of the biggest in Pakistan. You'll find very few broadcasters anywhere who can translate Shakespeare into Urdu, one of the major languages of the subcontinent. But Professor Bokhari has translated and produced plays by Shakespeare and Shaw, and I even think he's acted in them. Isn't that right, Professor?
Well, a few times, yes.
He took one Master of Arts degree in his own country, and he took another one at Cambridge University in England. After Pakistan was created in 1947, the professor left broadcasting, drama, literature, and teaching in his college and became a diplomat. He took part in the negotiation of the division of assets between India and Pakistan. And since 1949, he's been at United Nations meetings. Last year, he was chosen to be his country's permanent representative. Pakistan is interested in many issues at the UN. The biggest, of course, is the dispute with India over the territory of Kashmir. Pakistan and Indian troops face one another in Kashmir. Pakistan wants a free election there under the UN. And Pakistani believe the largely Muslim people of the area would vote to join Pakistan. But I expect we'll get more light on that matter in a few moments. Mr. Minister, we hear reports that the situation in Kashmir is very tense. Do you think there's any likelihood of open warfare breaking out between your own country and India?
Well, John, the situation is extremely uneasy, or in fact critical. India has concentrated the bulk of its army on our borders. We have taken up defensive positions, and the two armies are much too close to each other for anyone to feel happy about it. So from that you can draw your own conclusions.
And perhaps a question over here. Did I see you raise your... it's Marcel Hitchman of the Pakistan Times, Marcel.
Well, Professor Bokhari, could you tell us, what do you expect, what do you think should be the solution of this problem that has been tossed around here since 1948, and we always seem to postpone and postpone?
We are not looking for a solution. The solution has been arrived at and agreed upon. That is, a free plebiscite. What we are looking for is an implementation of the solution under the auspices of the United Nations. And that is where we are building our hope on the United Nations, that it will see that an international agreement which was adumbrated under their auspices should be implemented as soon as possible.
Is there another question over here? Here's William Fry of the Christian Science Monitor down at that end of the table, Bill.
Dr. Bokhari, it is sometimes said that Prime Minister Nehru of India attributes Europe's centuries of violence to the French-German hostility and wishes at all costs to avoid a similar a relationship between India and China. Now, do you think this is a sound hypothesis, speaking as an expert on the subcontinent? Do you believe that do you believe in the policy of conciliating communist China?
Well, so far as India's attitude toward China is concerned, I think you ought to put the question to Mr. Nehru. Several people have put it and haven't got a clear answer. But I believe that the Indian government is, or rather some elements associated with Mr. Nehru, are just as aggressive in many ways as other elements, only perhaps Mr. Nehru's aggression might be described as, to use an American phrase, aggression with a college education.
Perhaps someone over here, John Rogers of the New York Herald Tribune. John?
Sir, I want to go right back to Kashmir. You and your country and India are disputing over a sizable piece of territory, and I don't want to try to coin a saying here, but in any dispute there is some right and some wrong on each side. Now, going back to the beginning of this dispute, will Pakistan admit any wrongs that she would set right if India would set right certain wrongs that caused it all?
I'm afraid the question is rather vague. The whole point is, whatever Pakistan's wrong, and I don't know what you have in mind, the answer is not that because of that 4 million people should be handed over to Mr. Nehru because Mr. Nehru wishes it. I don't think that those 4 million people should be punished for any wrongs, whether committed by India or by Pakistan. But if you tell me what wrongs we have committed, I should like to sit in sackcloth and ashes if it is wrong.
Sir, I wasn't thinking of anything
John
specific.
Rogers again.
I was merely asking if you would confess any hasty errors in the beginning of this dispute, if India would.
Well, here I said this is rather vague. The whole point is, here is a territory about which there is a decision that a plebiscite should be held. If you found Pakistan guilty 10 times over of the worst crimes, this fact is still there, and therefore the plebiscite should nevertheless be held. You can, if you like, punish Pakistan later for several sins, but you can't punish Kashmiris for it.
And sitting next to John Rogers is Walter O'Hearn of the Montreal Star. Walter?
Well, Professor, this is not a question designed to push you into the latest mode in sackcloth, but I'd like to know this. Suppose the Kashmir case were settled tomorrow, everybody satisfied, everybody happy. Would there still be outstanding differences between you and India?
I think there would be outstanding differences. There are 3 or 4 major outstanding differences. But then there are differences between almost any 2 states you can think of. There are matters that are pending. Only I think that once the Kashmir question is settled, the atmosphere will improve so considerably that the other disputes could be settled far more easily than is possible at the moment.
Walter, did you want to ask another question?
Yes, I just wanted to pursue this. Is it true that water power has a bearing on this Kashmir question?
While it has a bearing, if you like, the situation is that the great part of West Pakistan depends for irrigation on rivers that arise either in India or in Kashmir. The rivers that arise in India have been in the past cut off by India on a certain occasion. And we think that if Kashmir passes into Indian hands, then our agriculture will be in great jeopardy in the hands of an unfriendly India. Does that answer your question?
Quite so, yes.
And over on this side is Francis Carpenter of the Associated Press. Frank?
Professor Bokhari, I wonder if we could bring this to a matter a little bit closer to the heart of us Americans, sir. there have been some reports that Pakistan is cooling off towards the United States in the belief that she will get more from the United States by being coy instead of cooperative. Do you think that Pakistan actually will adopt such a course? And if she does, why would she do it?
Well, I'm not an authority on coyness, but I think the best way to describe it is as follows: that the people of Pakistan are becoming extremely critical and dissatisfied with the present government for having placed so much reliance on the United Nations for a solution of this problem. Now, everybody knows that the major powers in the United Nations do play a major role. The two major powers that have been intimately interested in this question are the United Kingdom and the United States of America. And the people are getting extremely critical of our government for having placed our reliance, if you like, on these two. What the government's attitude in the matter is, the government still insists that the Security Council and the United Nations should discharge its fullest responsibility in the matter.
Could I...
Do you want to follow that up, Frank Carpenter?
I'm wondering if the professor misunderstood me. I was speaking only of the United States and not of the UN. Pakistan has been beside the United States in several critical issues. And these reports, as I understand it, indicate that Pakistan may have to be, should we say, wooed more than she has in the past to go along with the United States. And some of us in this country feel like that if a country is a friend, it is a friend and does not have to be wooed.
Well, I, as the representative of Pakistan in the United Nations, have received no instructions that I should seek now in the future to be wooed. But the fact does remain that there is a certain amount of disappointment in that the United States of America has not taken a stronger and a more clear attitude towards this question in the Security Council.
Right.
Is there a question down here? Here is Ed Holden of the New York Daily News. Ed?
Dr. Bokhari, I'd like to go a little further than Frank did on that question and ask you whether you were satisfied with the role that the United Nations had played in this dispute, and could you enlarge a little on what your government feels could have been done or hasn't been done?
Well, if I was asked to say yes or no, my answer would be we are not satisfied. The Pacific settlement of international disputes is one of the major functions and hopes of the United Nations. This dispute, with all its attendant dangers and risks, has been before the United Nations for over 3 years. In these 3 years, they have not passed beyond Article 36, which says that the United Nations should try and bring about understanding between two disputants. It has not even passed down to Article 37, which says that the United Nations, the Security Council, should give its own decision, leave alone passing on to something a little stronger than that, and that is to say, in its own way, reprimanding whichever state it considers to be defaulting. And to have stayed on Article 36 for 3 years is, we think, letting the situation get worse and worse every day.
Down here is Leon Edel of the New York Daily Compass. Leon?
Professor Bokhari, Pakistan was among the few Asian nations that signed the Japanese peace treaty. Do you consider that this pact, when ratified, will contribute to peace in the Far East?
Well, that was the understanding and the hope on which we based our decision to ratify the treaty. We think that this is not an ideal treaty that one had hoped to have, but then the situation, as you know, during the last 3 and 4 years has become far more complicated than anyone could predict the end of the war. In those circumstances, we think it's a good treaty because it is a treaty of reconciliation and not of revengefulness. And we also think that to delay it further would have been unnecessary to delay the rehabilitation of Japan as a sovereign power.
Well, if I might follow that.
Yes, you can, Leon. You want to follow that up?
Yes, I just wanted to know whether, in what way it can be considered a good treaty if so great a part of Asia is not signatory of it. I'm referring to the fact that such large parts of Asia as India, your neighbor, China, are not did not participate in the signing of it.
Well, suppose I try to answer that question by a question. How can it be a bad treaty when the majority of the world has signed it?
Well,
we must take numbers.
May I answer that question by more or less following through? Perhaps what I had in mind was that a treaty affecting one part of the world must demand must have the signatures, or at least and the attention of the countries in that part of the world. The fact that, for instance, so many Latin American nations signed that treaty has less significance, does it not, sir, since they are not really Pacific powers, than the fact that India, say, was absent from the signing table.
Well, you are putting me where the only way I can answer you is to give my interpretation of the Indian attitude. I would hesitate to do that unless you insist I should.
Thank you.
And next to Leon Edel, I thought I saw your hand up, didn't I? It's A.G. Mesrick, a freelance writer at the UN.
Dr. Bokhari, I want to refer back to Frank Carpenter's question having to do with attitudes toward the United States, but this time without reference to Kashmir and instead with reference to the Cold War between the United States and the Soviet Union. Certainly, many of the Asian nations have taken a neutral attitude as between the East and the West in the Cold War, and Pakistan has definitely thrown in its lot up to this time with the West, something that is very happy and encouraging to many Americans. Would you tell us, if you're not cooling off too much on that relationship, what the gains are in that position as against the neutral position being pursued so assiduously?
Well, I do not think that we have adopted that attitude because of any possible gain in the meaning in which that term is generally understood. We have tried to decide each issue on its own merits, and there's one thing that we very badly need, and we have always been guided by that consideration, both where we have positively expressed our view and where we have refrained from doing so, and that has been that we require, even more than other people, peace. We've just come into the world 4 years ago, and we haven't a dog's chance if we don't get a few years at least of peace in which we can develop, nor does any other Asiatic country. And that has been the one guiding principle in our attitude throughout this question.
May I follow that for just a second?
Sorry, yes, you can. Mesrick, did you want to go again?
Yes, just for a second. Couldn't what you have just said, Dr. Bokhari, been said by any of the nations that are taking the neutral position as the reason why they're holding the neutral position?
Well, no, because certain other nations, some of them my distinguished neighbors, do not merely want peace. They really want a free field, free of major powers of the West. They want a free field in Asia for their own expansionism.
And over on this side, Gabriel de Sabatino of the International News Service. Gabe?
Sir, what is the state of relations between your country and Communist China at present? I believe you have an ambassador in Peiping and are carrying on some trade with the Chinese.
Well, they are as you have described. There is a diplomatic exchange between the two countries.
But I mean, sir, would you say that relations are more friendly than before as a result of the ambassador being there in Peiping?
Well, I think the exchange of diplomatic relations is always a sign of a certain amount of goodwill on the part of the two countries. It's a formal expression of goodwill.
A.G. Wogley of the Press Trust of India.
Mr. Bokhari, let me turn back to the question of Kashmir. You said that you wanted a plebiscite according to the United Nations decision. And also, and subsequently, you said that Kashmir was so important to you from the water point of view that you could not possibly leave it in the hostile hands, and if it fell into hostile hands, it would endanger Pakistan's interest. Are you not thereby, in a way, prejudging the issue of the plebiscite, or did you intend to put your second answer in a different way?
I think the sentence that we could not possibly leave it in hostile hands is your paraphrasing of my statement.
No, sir, it was exactly as you said.
If that's what I said, I beg your pardon. What I really meant was, here is a country which, according to our best knowledge and belief, wants to join Pakistan. We may be wrong, but that is our belief. On the other hand, we say, why does India want to stay there? India being unfriendly, we think it wants to stay there for unfriendly purposes. And we cannot look upon this situation with equanimity.
Now over here is Isa El-Karashi of the Free Press of Egypt. Isa?
Professor Bokhari, some time ago the Pan-Islamic Conference held its meetings in Karachi, and as I understand, some important decisions were taken to combat communism in Asia. Can you tell me, please, what steps were taken to stop the flow of communism in Asia?
As you're speaking about a meeting between representatives of all the Muslim countries. Yes.
I think that was a non-official conference. I'm not really conversant with the details of the discussions that took place in that conference. But as for stemming the flow of communism, so far as my country is concerned, we have not felt anything that could be described as the flow of communism into our country. But we do believe that one of the major causes of discontent in the Asiatic continent, namely extreme poverty and low standards of living, there must be removed communism or no communism. And to that extent, we, and I think a large number of other Asiatic countries, are doing the very best they can. I do not believe that there is any sure method, long-range method, of keeping contentment and peace in that part of the world.
Sorry, Isa, did you want to continue?
Yes, sir, please.
Isa El-Karashi again of the Free Press.
Professor Bokhari, as I understand, Pakistan, directly or indirectly, was negotiating with other Muslim countries to draw some sort of an Islamic pact on the same lines as North Atlantic Treaty Organization or the Mediterranean Pact, which is now under consideration. Have you got an idea whether that is in progress or not?
I have no knowledge of such a pact in progress. The only thing approaching it that you might call a pact, it is not really a pact, is an organization which seeks to bring economic cooperation between a large number of Muslim countries in order to tackle common problems, because you know the economy has the same complexion in most of these countries. That is the nearest official thing that I know of. I do not know of any pact in progress, although of course our relations with all the Middle East countries, particularly Muslim countries, are extremely friendly.
Walter O'Hearn of the Montreal Star. Walter?
About this question of Asian neutralism, Dr. Bokhari, let me note that one great Asian power, China, is not neutral. Do you think that it is possible in the world today for any government to be truly neutral? I mean, in plain words.
Well, obviously some countries are, and how could they be unless it is possible?
Over on this
But
side.
what are they? I mean, that is my point.
Well, again, as I said, if you like, I will give my view. I think that India's attitude is different to many other countries in Asia, because I think, as I said, India's one great interest is, by talking of Asia for the Asiatics, and you remember we heard that slogan about 3/4 of a century ago, also used in Asia. Its main purpose is to get the Western powers out of there in order to have a stronger control of the weaker countries in Asia, which I do not think can be described as neutralism.
Over here, Gabriel de Sabatino of the International News Service. Gabe?
Sir, is there a communist movement in your country, and if so, how strong is it?
This question was put once to my foreign minister. He said, if I say there is a strong communist movement, it won't be true, and if I say there isn't, certain very great major powers will no longer be interested.
Now, Francis Carpenter of the Associated Press.
I think you have finally answered, sir, the question that I asked at the start about whether we should woo Pakistan or hope that she'll go along with us. Sir, you've traveled in this country quite a bit, I think. What is your, in a word or two, your impression of people as you know them in this country, the ordinary Americans you meet? What do you think about them?
Well, it's been my good fortune to address a large number of audiences, not only in international affairs, but on literature and on allied arts, in churches, in schools, in universities. And this may surprise you as an American, but my outstanding impression is of the essential humility of the people, the great willingness with which they ask genuine questions, and the spirit of inquiry. It's not only touching, it's almost moving, the way they do ask it. Mm-hmm. And I think there's a great deal of hunger for wanting to know the facts. There's a certain amount of confusion, but then everybody in the world is confused a certain amount today. But the great genuine desire for knowing things and doing the right thing is tremendous.
I think we may have time for another question. John Rogers of the New York Herald Tribune. John?
Well, as an American, sir, I will ask this question with humility because it goes right back to controversy. Do you think that there is any evidence that India, when and if she can, wants to swallow up Pakistan?
If she can, I have not the slightest doubt. It may find it difficult to digest it, but certainly it will.
Is there another question from here? Mesrick, can you make it very quickly in about 5 or 10 seconds?
No, but I'll make it as quickly as I can. I, in Washington the other day, saw a chemical substitute for jute, which may come into production within the next 8 or 9 years. I understand jute to be a very important part of the Pakistani economy. Do you know anything about this development?
No, I'm afraid I don't know anything about this development.
Well, I'm afraid our time is coming to an end, sir. And as a broadcaster, you know the value of a few seconds. On behalf of the UN correspondents, thank you very much for coming and being with us here tonight. For our audience, you have been hearing Professor Ahmed S. Bokhari, Minister and Permanent Representative of Pakistan to the United Nations. This is John McVeigh at Flushing Meadow, New York.